quickly give a background for myself. I joined Arcadia eFuels in February of this year. I have a background in the chemical industry prior to that, roughly 22 years, working for both producers and distributors. And I'm talking to you today based out of Houston, and look forward to the conversation. And joining me today is Amy Hebert, who's the CEO of Arcadia eFuels, and she may or may not be able to join in from time to time. She has connection issues that are not in her favor today. We've all been there. So let me queue up my presentation. Hopefully I do this out without too much pain for everybody. Okay. The presentation is up?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, good. And if anything's small, just let me know. Okay, so
it's not in presentation mode, but we can still see the slides.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, good. And I will send a PDF of this afterwards. This is really just meant to be conversational, and I look forward to your perspective. As you know, you've been talking about alternative fuels, as Gary mentioned earlier. So I want to do a little bit of setting the stage, right? This organization is a group of leaders advancing, the technology and benefits to your customers at your respective airports. So I know you're part of leading the broader conversation around emission reductions. Because this is what is your customers are likely talking to you about, or their customers are talking to you about. So this is just one perspective that is because it's an international perspective. It's kind of an easy way to set the stage. This is I think an easy way to say an all hands approach on emission reduction in aviation, right? So this is a screenshot taken from the ICAO long-term aspirational goal report that was just published in the fall of last year. And when we say an all hands approach, you probably are very aware of this. It's all hands on the solutions to abate CO2 emissions, right? So it's an aircraft technology conversation. It's an operations conversation. And then you get into a significant portion of the solution is sustainable aviation fuel. We are very clear that it is going to be, even within sustainable aviation fuel, a multiple technology solution if we want to get to the long-term goals set in 2050. So our solution is unique in that it is bringing commercial scale to CO2 based fuels. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But, one of the things that we hear most often from, those in the whether it be aircraft or airports, the airlines, cost, what is the cost, right? And we're sensitive to cost, and how are you going to assist us, right? So our solution is significant in that we are looking to bring these our SAF to the market at scale, because scale is what's going to help bring that cost down. So a little bit more about what that solution is. we refer to our SAF as eSAF. You'll find some of that common in the nomenclature as well, right? So electrified based SAF or electrification based SAF, right? So we are 100% renewable energy based produced fuel, right? And our solution actually can go beyond SAF. We can also make diesel and naphtha. So you know the e-diesel and naphtha. So we're not only able to decarbonize both the aviation space, but the chemical materials space, road transportation, maritime transportation. These are areas that our fuel is can help abate CO2. The headline for our solution is that we are, for each plant, we are eliminating 250,000 tons of CO2 per year. And we're doing that, what we call a net zero fuel, because we're able to capture the CO2. Our process in itself is not contributing to any further emissions. And then it's processed when it's used as a fuel. It is when it leaves the plant, it's negative, and when it's used in flight and combusted, then it's net zero. Like I said before, it's important to us to bring costs down. So we have a roadmap that you'll see that is considers what it takes to take our initial design of the plant and repeat that. So we're building in efficiencies as we repeat the design from our first plant in Denmark, and looking to build our second plant in South Texas. So Arcadia eFuels is not just a developer. We are in it for the long term. So we intend to operate, market, and sell these our fuels. And so, like I mentioned, our first plant is in Denmark. We look to start at that plant up in 2026, and then we plan to bring up 1 to 2 plants per year thereafter. So it's not just Arcadia talking about eSAF, right? There's a broader conversation about the renewable energy-based fuel, so much so that Europe has set a mandate that will start in 2030 to start to bring in eSAF as part of the broader SAF solution, right? And on a big scale, what they see as the opportunity is the bio-based fuels, whether they're waste oil or vegetable oil, they have a limit, whether it be a limit of land in Europe or a limit of the waste. The waste-based fuels, we've actually heard that the oils are now increasing in price as those entering to the market on those based fuels continues to increase. So they want to make sure that these renewable energy-based fuels are part of the solution, and Arcadia is at the forefront of that conversation. So it's often lost in the conversation. I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but what is our fuel doing, and how is it abating CO2, right? Because at its basic level, you still have combustion, right? And the concept here is to give you an understanding that it's about recycled CO2, right? We're capturing CO2, we're combining it with renewable hydrogen, and we're refining the fuel. And once it's used, then it can be recaptured, right? So Direct air capture is something in the future that we see as a CO2 source. Again, not economical today, so we're mindful of the economics around what the fuel needs to be, but we do see captured CO2 from other sources as a way to provide, economically appropriate fuel for the sector. And so that's what we're leading with, and we'll keep our line of sight into the direct air capture. But this is how we start the process of, on a broad scale, of eliminating or introducing new CO2 by mitigating the fossil fuel based or reducing the fossil fuel based need. So it's more than just the CO2. And so why is, you are going to continue to hear a lot about sustainable aviation fuel, and not all fuel is created equal. You'll hear conversations, and I'm sure you've already had some of them, around carbon intensity. What is the carbon intensity of the fuel? A lot of the fuel today that's on the market is participating, or on the market of a 50 to 70% reduction of CO2. Ours is near 100% CO2 because of the savings or because of the efficiency of our solution, because we're renewable energy based, because we're using captured CO2, right? So when you hear eSAF, specifically from Arcadia eFuels, this is one of the other reasons why our solution is unique. And then to the right, it doesn't get the headlines as much as the CO2 abatement, because that, of course, is the big challenge that we're all trying to tackle. But there are other benefits to the fuel that we're bringing. So reduced hydrocarbons, no oxygenates, reduced sulfur oxide emissions. These are all bringing cleaner air. And I assume that these are, I expect that these are part of the conversations with your customers and their customers. And so, that's one of the things that drives our focus in bringing this to scale. So I mentioned our first project is in Denmark, and our second that we're developing is in the Corpus Christi area, but we're not stopping there. We have a broader pipeline beyond those two, and I'll talk about the details that here in just a minute. But if we look at these areas, right, what's important, I think, for this group to think about, it's that bringing sustainable aviation fuel to the market at scale is what is going to bring the cost down. We're aware that every time we're sitting in front of stakeholders such as yourselves, the cost and scale is part of the conversation. And so what we are looking to do is bring that scale as quickly as possible. And so these are the areas that we're looking for, because that scale is what's going to bring the economics closer to fossil parity. And so just a little details on that for the timeline. So for Denmark, as I mentioned, late 2026 is where we're targeting. Our site's secured, and we have permits in progress. Our front-end engineering design, so FEED, is underway. And we have world-class partners with Technip Energies and Hitachi with the plant design. And so we're very pleased with those conversations. We have our license agreements signed, and have international partners with that as well. So, stay tuned to hear more. If you're following us on LinkedIn, or I encourage you to do so, and we'll have lots of updates, especially in the back half of the year around our Denmark project. And then in parallel, we are working on developing our Corpus Christi project. So as Gary mentioned, I spoke in front of the San Patricio County judges and about what we're bringing to the region, and what our plant will provide, to customers in the U.S. So our site is secured, and with the support of the county, and we have some tax abatement. Our grid connection is also confirmed, and we're working on permits. So, and then coming in just behind that, we have we're working with government in the UK. They have grant programs. They're also looking to have renewable fuels, specifically ESAF, developed in their region as well. And so we're participating in those conversations, and have found a couple of sites that we're leading with, and raw material partners for that as well. So with that, I'll open it up to questions and say I'd welcome to talk with any of you individually as you have questions. As I've joined Arcadia and entered into the aviation space, I'm very much still learning. And so I've spent a lot of time talking with airlines or airports on a larger scale, but I very much value the feedback from this team on what your challenges are, and how you see what Arcadia eFuels could do to help that. So with that, I'll open it up for questions or comments, conversations.
Well, Catherine, thank you. It's an excellent update, and appreciate that. With the SAF fuel, we're using the used vegetable oil type stuff, and they're limited what they can bring just based on the feedstock that they have. Without disclosing any proprietary information or methods, can you kind of describe how your system works or will work?
Sure. So we are renewable energy based, right? So that can be a variety of things. That can be wind energy, solar energy, hydro, nuclear, right? So it's going to be what's relevant and most cost effective in that region. And so renewable energy based, and water combined with electrolysis is how we're going to make green hydrogen. Both our first plant and second plant are green. We're back integrated into producing our own hydrogen. You take that hydrogen and combine it with captured CO2, whether it's captured from the air or from an industrial source. That is how we're making the fuel. So it creates those are combined. It creates a syngas. That syngas is refined, and so in that way, it's very much like a fossil fuel approach.
Transportation methods from the facility to the aviation industry. How do you see that getting to the end user?
Yeah, so for our Denmark project, we have trucking available. We have maritime shipping available from a jetty that's adjacent to our site. For the Corpus site, we're still in conversations, but there is a aviation fuel pipeline in the region. So we are looking at all options.
We have one or two pipelines down here.
Yeah, just a few.
So unlike the SAF fuel with the limited feedstock, then you don't really see an issue with feedstock for what you're using then.
No, that's right. And so at the top where I set the stage, that's one of the reasons why CO2 based fuels are part of the conversation. All the others, even if they're waste based, if they're crop based, there is a long-term limitation on those raw materials. So if we can get this CO2 based fuel to scale, that gives you a truly renewable based feedstock.
Excellent. Do we have other questions from the group? Yeah, Ken, I have another question. So as we started this, they're coming down here to San Patricio County, just north of Corpus there. And once Catherine came and did her presentation to the county, it wasn't too long after that, there was another firm that announced they were going to do something similar, but in the Matagorda, Texas area. And I asked Catherine if she could touch on that, even though it's not their company, but kind of what they're doing that is different from what Arcadia is doing. And Catherine, if you could touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to, that the company is HIF. I believe it stands for Highly Innovative Fuels. It's an excellent organization, and we celebrate their progress because, as I mentioned, it's going to take all of us if we're serious about this goal. That company is focused on making renewable-based gasoline as well as methanol. So you'll see a variety of approaches in the market. So you'll see sometimes that methanol is mentioned as a SAF. That's not yet approved. I believe there are ASTM conversations going on about making a path of methanol to jet fuel viable, but there's no approved specification for that path yet. So, but we very much celebrate that facility's success and sharing them on as they're bringing, near zero fuel to the passenger car and trucking sector with the gasoline.
Nice. Well, that'd be interesting. Do you have an idea, a time frame for them or anything? Or
they're similar to us. I'm sure they're moving as fast as possible. I am guessing that the startup is, because I know that they've done some groundbreaking in Matagorda, so I suspect it's going to be in similar time frames that we're talking.
Excellent. Look forward to that. See if we can get it.
It's all great, and celebrate that it's industrial growth in the region as well.
Now, your fuel itself, is it looking strictly to for more of the turbine side, kerosene type jet fuel? Is this adaptable to our current 100 low lead that we're going to be phasing out at some point in history and going to U94 and Gambi 100? And how those are going to play into that?
Yeah, so our jet fuel is specified under the Appendix A1 ASTM specification. So one of the reasons why we've gone with the solution and why it's significant is it is a drop-in to the fuel market, right? So it can be blended up to 50% with whatever is within that same ASTM approved jet fuel. So Jet A1, if it's approved for that, it can be blended. It can be blended with that, so we can participate in the existing infrastructure that is relevant for blending fuel.
Excellent. That'll be nice. No SDCs, temporary or supplemental type certificates be required for your drop in, or have you got
not that I'm aware of, but you may have just given me a new acronym to go research.
Okay, so supplemental type certificate. The U94 requires that. I don't know if Gambi's probably going to require some of that. Where that runs into is that the 100, all the older aircraft use the 100 low lead, and then so in order to use the new drop-in fuels, they need a type certificate. And some of the other aircraft, the new aircraft, will be able to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just one of those things where we look at what are the regulatory piece, because the type certificates, the supplementals, usually come with a cost to the operator.
Mm.
Even though the U94 is very low cost for the benefit, but it's just one of those questions just to ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so is that an annual cost? Is it a
no? It's just a one time.
Okay, one time.
We have any other questions from the field?
I had one really fast. So this is something that I've never heard anything on. I'm sure it's been tested, but your jet fuel does get blended with several different chemicals. The two most common ones are going to be PRIST, which is FSII, as well as diagnate, which is kind of an antimicrobial chemical.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that the SAF can be blended with that there's no issues that's been tested as well.
Yeah, so I can't speak to those specific additives. I am familiar with the PRIST brand. I'm glad to hear you to bring it up because it was my former colleagues that are running that business. So nice to hear the plug. But yeah, we we know what's the right word I'm looking for? It's complementary to a fossil-based fuel approach, right? So, one of the things I think to take a step back, why we have pursued the route that we have is we're using a gas to liquids approach to our fuel. Well, why is that significant? That is something that was brought to fossil fuel production. So making the fuel from gas instead of crude. That was new in the late 90s, early 2000s, bringing that onto the market. And it was something that was a change for the industry at the time, but now they truly see it as a drop-in. And we are, our technology is mirroring that, right? What's different and unique is matching it with the green hydrogen and scaling it to match where the green hydrogen production technology is. So hopefully that kind of gives you some context.
No, I appreciate it. That's just something that I was sitting here thinking about, and I'd never heard anybody really address that. And I assumed that the tests had been done and that it was just a complete replacement for Jet A with no issues with those additives.
Yeah, that's why there's the blending requirement of 50%. So exactly what Catherine explained, I mean, Shell and Sasol developed this technology a long time ago from natural gas to the final fuel. It's called the FT-SPK specification. And we meet that exact specification, but to go from there to A1, you have to have a 50% blending component with fossil fuels, which includes the aromatics and the other additives that you're mentioning.
So we have Catherine and Amy, they have about 10 minutes before they have to go to another meeting. Is there any other questions from the field?
Well, I actually have one question for the group, if I may.
Well, actually, I was gonna give you the floor here because I was remiss in introducing you and allowing you to say a few words, and I apologize for that. But since no questions, then Amy, go ahead and take over for the remaining time, just to introduce you and then your question. And I apologize that I didn't get you in the front.
No, that was fine. I thought it's gone really well so far. But yes, I'm Amy Hebert, and as Catherine mentioned, I'm the CEO of Arcadia eFuels. I have a background working with large companies in the US and also in Europe in the chemicals and oil and gas space. And we are just really excited about Arcadia eFuels and being able to produce the world's future fuels. We know it's going to be a long road ahead, but just like the wind and solar industry started, in the early 2000s, everyone kind of like, oh, that's so expensive, we don't like that. And, now it's kind of becoming mainstream, even though it's a small percentage of the world's energy usage, using the natural resources of wind and the sun to power things is excellent. And as the wind and solar energy continues to grow, then e-fuels can continue to grow. So we're really, really happy about that. And then, taking CO2, the problem we're trying to solve for as a world and society are reducing the CO2 emissions to combat climate change. And by capturing the CO2 from the air and reusing it as in a closed loop for aviation fuel and even diesel fuel is really fantastic. So we think that this is a exciting place to be right now. But one question I have for you is, there's a lot of infrastructure at various airports. And every airport is different. Sometimes there are storage tanks for fuels at the airport. Some airports can even do blending on site. Other airports need to have the fuel brought in via truck. And so it was just a general question to you guys. I think, you'd asked about how we would transport the fuels from our site to airports, but I wanted to hear from you guys, like, what is your preferred method? Do you want the fuels already blended, ready to use? What are your customers demanding, and what is the best way for you to receive fuels?
Well, there's a couple of things on that, because we have a couple of different group types of airports. Mine is strictly a general aviation. I have some corporate jets, but mostly a blend of turbine fuel and avgas and Jet A and avgas. So for me, it comes pre-blended in a truck because I have a couple of 12,000 gallon storage facilities. But other airports are larger. They have complete storage units off site that are piped underground right to their tanks. And I'm not familiar with the airports that have a blended facility, maybe some of the other guys, but that's typically, at least down here, it was just trucked in, 8,000 gallon tanker type stuff. And some of them are probably larger, DFW, and I know, Eric, you're up at Mesquite. Some of the other larger airports that have commercial service, obviously use more fuel. New Brunsville, they're running 650,000 gallons a year. I run about 75, 80,000. And then DFW is, multi-millions. But so if anybody wants to add some more to that.
I'm going to jump in again, if you don't mind, Gary.
Well, absolutely. No, this is all good.
And just my general thought on it, kind of looking at our operation as well, because what we have is one 12,000 gallon Jet A tank. Right now, we already receive our fuel pre-mixed with Prist. And one of the main reasons that we did that is for the liability aspect. Mm-hmm. So whenever you're selling a product, you want to make sure that you're actually giving them what they're buying. And it's one of those things that if you're relying on the airport staff to make sure that we're blended at 50-50 and something happens, that's always going to come into question, well, what was that actual ratio? And so I will say, from a legality perspective or a liability perspective, I'm sure that we would want it to be brought to us pre-blended by the group, by the professionals, so that way we know what we're pumping into that aircraft does meet that standard. Okay.
And do you buy from multiple suppliers or one supplier?
So right now, all of our fuel comes through Titan Aviation Fuels, okay. Which specifically it comes from the Magellan pipeline here in the Dallas area.
Okay. Yeah, I think we understand that in the Corpus Christi area, there's a direct pipeline for kerosene from Corpus to Dallas Fort Worth. So that's a nice way to transport things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Catherine mentioned, but I mean, we'll be producing around 26 million gallons a year of the e-kerosene per site. So it'd be a lot of trucks. It's something like, 10, 12 trucks per day. So of course we can truck, but we prefer to, that's also, then you have scope 3 emissions for trucking, unless we use our diesel, which is our diesel's net zero carbon. That doesn't need any blending, which is nice. But the other thing, I guess, are you, especially on the private side, do you have corporate customers that are requesting, lower carbon fuels, or is it still not a big thing from your customer side?
Well, from our side down here, they're looking, it's not necessarily a wait and see look yet of how it's going to be. We just don't have the Jet A customer base that would generate
Okay. Right.
the price increase.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of it comes to, is some of the pricing and the benefits, is getting that mindset of the long-term benefit of it for the price. And then, we have the whole who gets to capture the credits for, is it the manufacturer? Is it the facility that's delivering it? Is it the end user at the airport? So they're still working out some of those, but right here in our area, we haven't had a lot of conversation about how to get it here and how's it going to go. And because we're right down here in, fossil fuel land. So that's still a little different conversation yet for our area down here. East Coast and West Coast will be, much different conversation, especially on the West Coast out there. There was an incident where they tried to eliminate at an airport Hunter low lead altogether, but it didn't quite work out yet. But so it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be a long process to get everybody in a mindset, and change is not easy for a lot of people. So
we'll get there. We have plenty of time in the next few years, so it'll come together. There's just a lot of conversations, and having a conversation like this is a great start. So
yes. Is there any other questions from the field? Okay, Amy, Catherine, do you have any final words?
No, I would just say I'm going to send out the presentation, but really it's just meant to be a conversation starter. I welcome any questions. If your fuel suppliers have questions, please, feel free to connect me with them or introduce me. We very much appreciated the time and the opportunity to meet you all and learn. And so thank you.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate both of you coming and talking to us about new fuels and emerging technologies in the fuel industry, and what you guys are bringing to, the aviation world and that. And again, it was an excellent conversation, just like I said, just conversation starter to let everybody know what is coming out there and what's starting to come our way. And then we just keep moving forward with new technology. And again, thank you both for joining us and coming to our South Central chapter. And we look forward to more communications.
It was a pleasure. Take care. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.